So, be honest, how many times have you seen this screen in Baldurs Gate 3? Because, if I am going to be honest, I've actually seen it less often than I would like. And you might be like, what? Why would you want to have everyone die and fail? Well, I love a little bit of challenge in my RPGs. From throwing myself at a wall of a Souls boss in action, fast-paced battles to the death, to having to carefully think and extensively plan out the perfect turns in a CRPG like Baldurs Gate 3. And that didn't happen a crazy amount for me. I've played on Tactician the entire way, and I think ultimately, I think the game is balanced around you not min-maxing your builds, of course. I think if you just pick a class for each of your 4 party members, let it go to 12, put on the gear that you happen to find, you can beat everything, even on Tactician. But I really, really like it when I can fully min-max theorycraft, do some silly builds with broken combos, and even still, there are moments where it is hard, where I've had to try multiple times. And there is no better moment to have to try multiple times, to feel that pressure, to have those perfect turns in the perfect order, than when it is against a boss. A big climactic moment of both narrative and combat that really is that apex of a D&D-esque role-playing experience, at least to me. That twin of story and the genuine fear of losing your character is a really sweet feeling. And of course, in, Baldur's Gate you just load and try again, but still, it's nice. So I wanted to go over, in my opinion, the 5 best and, in many cases, hardest bosses that I experienced, and what I believe to be the 5 greatest overall combat encounters in all of Baldur's Gate because of it. So without further ado, let's get into this with number 5.
You're everyone's punching bag and no one's favourite.
Yes, it's everyone's favourite auntie, Ethel, the Hag. Now, I'm going to specifically name the first time you fight her in Act 1 here, but the second and final time in Act 3 is also pretty good. It just lacks the same kind of spark that the first one did, primarily because you've already experienced something very similar. But I think she might be the most memorable, sort of optional big bad of Act 1. It was very close to choosing Mr. Grimforge, but I ended up here because I just really like the character they gave the Hag. When you first meet her, as you walk into the fake swamp, all the way to figuring out what's actually going on with the girl that she's stolen, and then chasing her down through her lair as things get weirder and more messed up, before you end up in this final battle where she pulls all these tricks on you, splitting into multiple copies that you have to work out which one's real, and yes, examining them can help you do that, but that's metagaming, right? And you just have this full-on, okay. And if you end up here a little bit too soon, or you're a level or 2 short, it actually can end up quite challenging. But what I think is perhaps more challenging is the added element of keeping Mayrina safe, especially when the Hag splits into a fake of her and the real one, and you have to kind of tactically do a very light little stab, just a shallow little stab, just to see which one is real after rescuing her from the burning cage. And I love fights in both this game and D&D where the only objective isn't to just kill the boss or the enemy, but there's something else playing on behind the scenes. And then past that, her little vicious mockery lines are brilliant, and everything just kind of fits together to make this really really satisfying little side story mini-boss experience. And yeah, to jump back to Act 3, actually having the end of it, that coming full circle, putting her down for good, it is satisfying, certainly. Then, as we go to number 4, this is where the challenge ramps up a little bit.
I've made a huge mistake.
And of course, it's hard to do a video/list like this without spoilers pertaining to the bosses I choose, so be aware of that before we go any deeper if you've not fought Cazador yet. But in any case, this is great. Firstly, if you let him ascend and turn into Ultra God Mode Vampire Lord, then you're just in for one hell of a punishing, brutal encounter that even challenges the aforementioned min-maxed builds. But that's not even the reason that he's here. He's not even here because of the narrative connection with Astarion, because I'll be honest, guys, you might judge me for this, you might look at me different, but I don't really care for Astarion that much. I didn't use him the entire playthrough. I brought him here just because it felt a bit mean to resolve this entire plot point without him, but otherwise, But that said, it is still kind of very interesting to have everything that happens in his mansion, everything that's revealed, and the decisions you can make here, especially with what Astarion ends up doing, but the actual fight itself against Cazador as a boss encounter really surprised me in how wonderful it was. Because of this looming timer, you have 3 turns before he will ascend. You can weaken him by standing in the little ritual circles, which blocks that power-up, so you can very deliberately choose which power-ups you want to block, depending on which one. The swarm of extra enemies certainly doesn't help things, and you have to navigate them. The fact that there is ways to, well, use the fact he's a vampire, like casting daylight on the battlefield and weakening him greatly, but it's that 3-turn thing that gets me. It's what I was saying with the Hag, it's always best when there's a secondary objective. And the challenge of kill him in 3 turns before he ascends, killing Astarion, that is, oh, I love that. And that took everything that I had, even at level 12 in min-max builds with legendaries and the best gear you can get. This is one of the last things that I did before finishing the game, and it really did scratch an itch. It's not higher because I think Cazador himself is just fine as like a character, and I think he could have been a little bit cooler, or at least that's just me personally, but the actual mechanics of his encounter is really, really fun. Then, at number 3, the only non-optional boss that's going to appear here, and one that I probably don't need to labor on very much.
Try again.
Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!
Ketharic Thorm, specifically the final encounter that has the second phase of the Avatar of mykrul, because this really is a fitting, climactic, and satisfying end to the first 2 chapters of the game. And because while in Chapter 2 you can still pop back to Chapter 1 areas, they do feel a lot more connected and together than Act 3, and this really is the capstone of everything you've done up until this point, the main plot threads coming together at Moonrise Towers. Whether you talk no jutsu him into the pit or have to kill him and then get to the Avatar, it still ends up being this big deal baddie. Honestly, the worst thing about Ketharic and the Avatar of mykrul is it set my expectations for Orin and Gortash way high, and I admit to feeling a little bit let down by both of them, both thematically and challenge-wise. But in Ketharic's case, especially if you don't have the help of Dame Aelin, and you have to face it in the evil path where Isabel is there as well against you, it can really be a little bit of a stern test if you do it a little bit too early or you're not prepared. Obviously, you have a preliminary battle against Ketharic up top, which is also quite a fun encounter, but this one here in all of its phases is great. With how much you can learn about Ketharic, he's quite a tragic character, and this, I think, is a really fitting end to him as you move on to the final act of the game. Then we get to two bosses that I think are so far and away above literally everything else in the entirety of Baldurs Gate that it's almost not fair that they have to share a list with anything else. But that's just my opinion. First up,
I am the heart of the gate. I am the one who roars. This time, you will not escape it.
if you were to ask me what the hardest fight in the game for me was, if we're going to exclude successfully rescuing every single prisoner from the Iron Throne, which isn't technically a boss, but god did I enjoy figuring that one out, well, my answer would be this undead dragon, the heart of the gate. Yes, the story implications, his connection to the Emperor, and all of that is brilliant. But just looking at the fight in a vacuum, my word, I was so close to making this number one, and it really only came down to one thing that I didn't, which we'll get onto, but he was brutal. I kid you not, nothing in the entirety of the game took me more attempts to beat than ansur. Now, primarily that's because I came here at level 10, with an unoptimized party and setup, and you're watching how brutally it went. But I didn't want to leave and come back and get stronger. I knew I could. I knew I could do it. And eventually I did. No other fight in the game took me more than 3 attempts at max. Ansur here took me maybe 10 to get right. As I finally finished him here, I ended up having a strategy of running all the way back out the room, hiding behind the doorway wall entrance to stop his big Nova attack, and then run back in, and even then, it ended with 2 party members down, 1 on 20 health and 1 on half health, and that was with everything going perfectly for me with the strategy that I chose to employ. His reaction damage to being hit for the first time around, his attack of opportunity is brutal, the slam, him flying around, but beyond that, he's just badass. He's a giant undead storm dragon. And then his mechanic of his ultimate attack, where you can break the crystals to give yourself the buff to survive it and hide behind them to take this preposterously powerful blow, is also really thrilling and reminds me of a proper little like raid encounter in an MMO with actual defined mechanics, and I find that really enjoyable. He is just utterly magnificent to combat when you're not in a massively overpowered setup and you really have to work with his mechanics in the best way possible. I really cannot express enough how much I enjoyed him, both from a he's a cool boss, look at him, and actually overcoming the challenge he represented was fist-pumpingly satisfying. He is only beaten by the hairiest of breps, and it honestly could have been a draw by...
I owe you thanks.
Yes, you knew what was going to be number one when you clicked on this video, because it's probably the same number one that you have and that everyone else has. And it's Raphael. He, taunting you and offering you deals throughout the entire game, being this looming evil. Honestly, he could have been the main big bad, and I think it would have worked, ignoring the whole absolute stuff, but then eventually ending up in the House of Hope. And that whole little, like, heist sequence, raiding it, plundering it of all its massively potent treasures and magic items, saving Hope and the extra challenge that poses, escaping to the front while it's all burning down around you, getting to know your inner self, and then coming face to face with the master of the house himself, and I need only do one thing to cement him as the greatest encounter in Baldurs Gate 3, and it is play
Souls go to their dooms in flame
Hell has its laws. Hell. Effect in the cause. Curtain falls, but hold your applause. Squirm, for now down here come the claws. Brave, but it's all been for naught. True souls that couldn't be bought. Doomed, detected, and caught.
Yeah. Oh, come on. Nothing got anywhere near as cool of a backing track as Raphael. It has no right to be that wonderful. Why is it so good? I kind of realized, wait, there's lyrics going on? And just sort of stopped in the middle of a turn to listen to it, and I was like, yep, alright, this is phenomenal. I can't. This is so good. And then past that, the fight itself is really challenging. Even to min-max builds and proper setups and level 12 and all of the plunder you've just gotten from the House of Hope, you've got the 4 pillars to deal with, you've got the extra devils to deal with, you've got to keep Hope alive if you care about that, which is challenging in itself, because she can just get one-shot by a bad roll against his bigger booms, and Ygir as well, depending on whose side he's fighting for. Raphael's Ascendant form is menacing, he has got chunky amounts of health, the 666 of course, very nice, and his soul-fueled magic is brutal and punishing, and it really does feel like a, oh shit, we have maybe made a mistake coming to the House of Hope and pissing off this devil. Maybe we underestimate how powerful he actually is. Oh my god. And doing this blind for the first time? Whew, I really expected to be able to talk my way out of it, but no. And it resulted in just this beautiful, climactically difficult fight that really was a poignant end to the whole Raphael plotline, and it gives him that #1 spot for me. So let me know then what your 5, or any amount really, favorite boss encounters in all of Baldur's Gate would be if you had to commit, had to choose. But for now, like if you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.